Okay, picture this. You're walking along this really peaceful creek. It's in Savage, Minnesota. Everything's quiet.
Right, serene almost.
Exactly. But then, out of nowhere, the water starts. Well, it ripples, gurgles a bit, and then whoosh, shoots up like a few feet in the air.
Uh, yeah, you'd immediately think geyser, wouldn't you?
Totally. But it's not. Get ready, because today we're doing a deep dive into something, well, uniquely Minnesotan. Boiling springs.
That's right. You brought us some really fascinating articles on this, and we're going to unpack what makes Boiling Springs such an interesting spot, especially if you're curious about local natural wonders.
Yeah, like what's actually happening there.
Exactly. We'll look at the geology, the history behind it, and also why it holds a pretty special place culturally.
So the goal is really to give everyone listening a good feel for the place, maybe even inspire a visit.
Precisely. You'll get a well-rounded picture. We want you to be informed, ready to explore if you head out there.
Awesome. And we've got some great sources. We're looking at the science bit, the geology,
Right, how the boiling actually works.
and then the history from the Scott County Historical Society, and even its importance to Dakota and Ojibwe communities from an ethnographic study.
A really good mix to draw from.
Okay, let's dive in then. So this boiling water, what is the deal? Is it hot?
That's the first thing people wonder. But no, unlike places like Yellowstone, there's no actual heat involved. It's not geothermal.
Really? So what then?
It's all about pressure. It's what's known as an artesian spring. Basically, you've got groundwater deep down that's under natural pressure.
Okay.
And this spring happens to be located right under the bed of Eagle Creek.
Ah, so the water's trying to get out, but it's under the creek.
Exactly. And it has to push its way up through, mud and sediment on the creek bottom.
That can't be easy. Sounds messy.
Well, it creates resistance. As the water pushes, the pressure builds up behind that blockage. Sort of like, I don't know.
Like shaking a pop bottle.
Yeah, kind of. The pressure increases and increases until finally it's strong enough to burst through the mud.
And that's the boiling, that sudden burst.
That's the boiling. It forces its way to the surface, sometimes shooting up like you described.
Huh. But you mentioned it stops and starts. It's not continuous.
Right, that's key. Once that pressure is released in the burst, things calm down again. The boiling stops.
And then?
Then the whole process restarts. The underground pressure needs time to build back up behind whatever sediment shifted around.
So it's this cycle. Pressure builds, pop, release, quiet, then build again.
Exactly. It's this really cool, almost rhythmic, natural display. Not hot at all, just physics.
Wow. That makes sense. So you could be standing there by Eagle Creek and it looks totally calm.
The Historical Society actually notes it's generally a very peaceful, quiet place right there.
And then suddenly this bubbling eruption happens. It's like a little surprise from the creek.
It really is a neat contrast. Quiet creek, sudden burst of energy. And, looking back at the history, this isn't some new thing. People have known about these springs for a long, long time.
Oh yeah, the Historical Society mentioned the Dakota name for it, Maka-Usoda.
Maka-Usoda. It really grounds the place, doesn't it? It connects it way back.
Definitely. And they also tell that story about the Hattenberger family who owned the land there.
Right. And what's interesting is that they apparently recognized it wasn't just like a weird water feature. They saw it as special, maybe even sacred.
They had a sense of its importance, it sounds like.
Seems that way.
Yeah.
And by the early 1900s, they actually turned the area into a sort of private park.
A park, like with trails and stuff?
Yeah, they made trails, set up picnic spots. They even put up a fence so visitors could watch the springs boil without getting too close.
Smart. So it was an attraction even back then?
It definitely became a local spot people would visit, like an early natural tourist destination, you could say.
That's fascinating. But wait, the article said something else. Didn't it used to bubble constantly back then?
Ah, yes, that's a really interesting historical note. Apparently, reports from that time suggest it was a more continuous bubbling, not this stop-and-start thing we see now.
Huh. Wonder why it changed.
Well, the Historical Society speculates that maybe now sand or sediment partially clogs the opening more often.
Oh, so that blockage leads to the pressure buildup and the sudden burst, whereas before, maybe it flowed more freely.
That's the thinking, yeah. The underground plumbing might have shifted a bit over the decades. Natural changes in the creek bed or the spring itself.
Makes you realize these things aren't static. And they definitely needed that fence back then, right? I read that before the fence, cows or horses sometimes wandered in.
Oh, yeah. Apparently, they could get stuck in the quicksand right around the spring openings. A little reminder that nature Even quiet spots can have hazards.
Definitely adds a layer to the story. So, okay, let's shift gears a bit to that ethnographic study you mentioned. That brings in a whole different dimension, doesn't it?
It really does. It helps us understand the deeper cultural connections. Now, the study itself focused mainly on Coldwater Spring, which is nearby.
Right, on that old Bureau of Mines property.
Yes. But it gives us invaluable context for understanding how springs in this whole region are viewed, particularly by the Dakota and Ojibwe people.
What did it highlight?
A key point is Coldwater Springs' link to the Emmedote area. That's the confluence where the Minnesota-Mississippi rivers meet.
Okay, MDOT.
For the Imdawakanton Dakota, Emmedote isn't just where two rivers join. It's considered like the center of their world, a place of immense spiritual and historical significance.
Wow, the center of everything. So springs nearby would naturally carry importance too.
Exactly. They're part of that sacred landscape.
Yeah.
And this study talks about the long-standing tradition for both Dakota and Ojibwe people of collecting spring water.
For ceremonies.
Yes, for various ceremonial uses. Things like the Inipi, the sweat lodge ceremony. The purity of the spring water is considered really vital for those cleansing and renewal rituals.
So the water itself is sacred, not just a resource.
Precisely. It's imbued with meaning and spiritual power. And the study actually notes that Coldwater Spring is formally recognized as a sacred site by a federally recognized Dakota tribe and also by the Iowa tribe of Oklahoma.
That really underlines its significance.
It does. And the study goes even further, connecting the water to the plants in the area.
How so?
For the Dakota, there's this understanding that the healing qualities of certain plants are linked to the purity and the sort of life force of the spring water itself. It's all interconnected.
That's a really holistic view, nature working together.
It is. The study mentions specific plants the Dakota traditionally used, like sugar maple, green ash, bulrush, and similar uses for the Ojibwe, maybe including others like American elm or cottonwood. It shows this incredibly rich ecological knowledge they have.
It really paints a picture of how deeply their culture is woven into the natural world there.
Absolutely. And just to loop back to Boiling Springs specifically, it's worth remembering that Eagle Creek, where the springs are, well, that creek eventually flows into the Minnesota River. So this small, unique spot is physically connected to that larger, culturally vital waterway, the Emmedote area.
Right, it's all part of the same system. Okay, so pulling this all together, Boiling Springs is, well, it's more than just weird bubbling mud, isn't it?
Oh, much more. You've got the fascinating geology, the artesian pressure, and then you layer on the human history, the Hattenbergers, the early tourism.
Right.
And underpinning it all is this deep, enduring cultural significance for the Dakota and Ojibwe people, tied to the water, the land, and their traditions.
It's a spot where science, history, and culture really visibly meet. A reminder that, even quiet places have these incredible layers.
Well said. And for anyone listening who's thinking about checking it out, Boiling Springs in Savage really does offer something special.
A chance to see that weird boiling for yourself.
Definitely. But also, as you're watching it, maybe take a moment to think about that history, the Maka-Yusota name, the sacredness of water in this region.
Yeah, approach it with a bit of mindfulness, maybe. Be respectful.
Exactly. It's an opportunity to connect with a unique natural phenomenon, but also with the deeper stories the land holds.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what other places right around us, places that seem ordinary, might have these kinds of hidden stories? Natural surprises or deep historical roots just under the surface?
It's a great question. Maybe your next local walk or exploration could uncover something just as fascinating. The land always has stories, some visible, some you have to dig a little deeper for.